My fiancé cheated with my brother in our bed 2 months before the wedding. But when my mother defended the traitor and demanded I support them financially, I taught them a lesson they'll never forget. I'm 30 years old. I work in financial consulting, and I need to tell this story because what happened like a year and a half ago basically destroyed everything I thought was my life. I guess I should start from the beginning, when things still seemed normal, or like when I still believed I knew the people closest to me. I was engaged to Isabella. We'd been dating since college, like 5 years together, and I'd finally decided to take the big step. The proposal was in December, nothing too elaborate but special, in the park where we had our first real date. She said yes, and I don't know, happy in that quiet way you feel when you finally sense your life is on the right track. We had the wedding planned for October. Everything was booked, the venue, the photographer. We'd even paid the first deposit on the catering. I was working a ton at that time, putting in extra hours because I wanted us to have a good financial cushion before getting married, and also because there was a possibility of a promotion at the company, and I didn't want to screw it up. Mess it up. My brother Connor was always different from me. He's 27, 3 years younger than me, and since we were kids, we were like night and day. I was the responsible son, the one who got good grades, the one who got stable jobs, the one who did things right, let's say. Connor was the charismatic one, the one everyone liked, the one who always had some new project or some crazy idea. My parents, Margaret and Richard, were always kind of weird with us too. My mom especially had this thing about defending Connor no matter what. If he got in trouble, she'd find a way to justify it, to say it wasn't his fault, that circumstances were difficult, that he just needed more support. My dad was more passive, like he'd nod and let mom handle things. I learned early on that it was better not to make waves, just live my life, and that's it. The thing is that in July, like 2 months before the wedding, Isabella lost her job. She worked in marketing for a medium-sized company and there were layoffs. You know how it is. She was devastated. She'd put so much effort into that position, but I tried to support her the best I could. I told her not to worry about money, that I could cover everything while she looked for something new, and that we had enough savings to be fine. To keep herself busy and not go crazy at home, Isabella signed up for a pottery class at a local studio. She said she'd always wanted to try something creative and that it would be good to do something with her hands while sending out resumes. What I didn't know, because literally nobody told me anything, is that Connor was also taking classes at that same studio. Turns out he decided that his new project was to become a ceramic artist or something like that, basically another one of his phases where he obsesses over something for 3 months and then abandons it. So there they were, both of them in the same classes twice a week. While I was working like 12 hours a day, trying to secure that promotion, Connor started coming to the house more often. At first I didn't think anything weird. I mean, he was my brother, right? He'd come over, stay for dinner, watch a movie with Isabella while I checked emails in the study. Isabella would tell me it was nice that Connor and I were getting closer, that family was important, and I'd nod without thinking much about it. But it started being a lot, like he'd come over 4 or 5 times a week, and sometimes I'd get home late from work and he'd still be there. The two of them sitting on the couch watching Netflix or whatever. Once I came home, and they were drinking wine together at 11 at night, and when I asked what they were celebrating, Isabella said nothing. They were just relaxing. Looking back, I should have seen it coming, but I was so caught up in work and so trusting of both of them that I just didn't connect the dots. There were signs. Of course there were. Isabella started being less interested when I'd get home. Like she'd barely ask how my day had been. Connor had this weird smile when he'd see me, like he knew something I didn't know, but I was blind, completely blind. In August, I had to take a business trip to another city. It was to close an important contract, and I was supposed to be gone 4 days. Everything went faster than expected. We closed the deal in 2 days, and I decided to come home early to surprise Isabella. I thought we could go out to dinner, spend time together, because between work and the wedding stress, we hadn't had many quality moments lately. I took a morning flight, arrived at noon, bought flowers on the way home. I walked in through the front door with my keys, called out to Isabella, but there was no answer. Her car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home. I went up the stairs, opened the bedroom door, and there they were. Isabella and Connor. In my bed. In the bed I shared with my fiancée, where we were going to sleep as a married couple in 2 months. My brother. My fucking brother. I don't remember much of what happened in the next 5 minutes. I know I screamed. I know Isabella started crying and trying to cover herself. I know Connor tried to say something, but I was already on top of him. I broke his nose. I remember that perfectly. The sound of bone crunching under my fist. There's blood on my white work shirt. Isabella was screaming for me to stop, to let her explain, and I could only repeat over and over, "Get out of my house. Get out of my fucking house." They both got dressed quickly, Connor with his nose bleeding all over his face, and I threw them out. I literally pushed them out of the house, threw Isabella's clothes out the window, and locked all the doors. I sat on the living room floor for I don't know how long. The flowers I'd bought were lying by the door. My phone started ringing. First Isabella, then Connor, then my mom. I didn't answer any calls. Eventually I called my dad, because I needed to tell someone, and he was the one I thought would be more rational. I told him everything, without graphic details but enough for him to understand. He was silent for a long moment, and then said he was going to talk to Mom and would call me back. Mom called like 20 minutes later. And here comes the part that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. The first thing out of her mouth wasn't, "I'm so sorry, son," or, "How horrible what they did." No. The first thing she said was, "Connor is in the hospital. You broke his nose. He needs surgery." And when I told her I didn't give a damn about his nose, that he'd fucked my fiancé in my bed, she said, "Don't use that language with me." And yes, what they did was wrong. But violence is never the answer, and Connor is going through a difficult time in his life and clearly needs support. I hung up, blocked her number, blocked my dad's too, because I knew she'd use him to keep calling me. 3 days later, Connor sent me a message from an unknown number asking me to meet to talk. I didn't want to see him ever again in my life. But Isabella also sent a message saying we needed to talk like adults, that there were things I needed to know. I agreed to meet them at a public coffee shop because I didn't trust myself not to hit him again if we were in private. They arrived together. That image, the two of them arriving together like they were a couple, turned my stomach. Connor had bandages on his nose and bruises under his eyes. Isabella looked tired but also had this thing, I don't know, this thing of determination on her face. They sat across from me, and Connor started with, "Look, brother, I know this is horrible, but you need to know that it wasn't something planned. It just happened. We fell in love, and sometimes love appears where you least expect it." I just stared at him without saying anything. Isabella took his hand right there on the DS table for me to see, and said she was so sorry about how I'd found out, but that they'd been together since June, that they'd tried to resist but couldn't, that the connection was too strong, that she loved Connor and he loved her. And then came the bomb. Isabella said, "Also, I'm pregnant. It's Connor's. I'm like 6 weeks along." The coffee shop kept running normally around us, people ordering lattes and eating muffins, and I was sitting there processing that my fiancée was pregnant with my brother's child. Connor said they were going to have the baby, that they were going to be together, that they hoped that with time I could forgive them because they were still family. I told them never, that they'd taken everything from me, my relationship, my family, my trust, and that they could go to hell together. I got up and walked out of that coffee shop and didn't look back. I canceled the wedding. I had to call all the vendors, lose all the deposits, send messages to the guests. The shame of having to explain, even vaguely, why everything was being canceled was unbearable. Some friends asked what had happened, and I'd just say it didn't work out, that it was private. I couldn't tell the truth. I couldn't say that my brother had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Mom started a campaign of text messages from different numbers of her friends, numbers I didn't recognize. All the messages were variations of the same thing, that I needed to forgive. That family was most important, that Connor was sorry, that Isabella was suffering too, that I was going to be an uncle, and couldn't miss that. That I was being selfish. That I was being immature. That forgiveness was healing. I blocked each new number that appeared. It was my dad who finally called me from work, and I answered because I didn't think he would. He told me that Mom was very worried about me, that the family needed to heal, that Connor was my only brother, and that this shouldn't break our relationship forever. I asked him if he understood what they'd done, if he understood the magnitude of the betrayal. He sighed and said yes. He understood, but that these things happen, that the heart wants what it wants, and that I was strong enough to get over it. I told him that if that was his position, that if he was going to defend Connor, then I didn't want to talk to him either. He said he was disappointed in my attitude. I hung up. I made a decision that would change everything. I decided to leave. Not just change houses or neighborhoods, but leave the city completely. I requested a transfer at work to another office in another city, like 6 hours away, and luckily there was a position available, even better than the one I had. It was kind of a lateral promotion. I sold the house where I'd found Isabella and Connor. I couldn't keep living there. I packed the essentials, hired a moving company for the rest, and left. I didn't tell anyone in my family where I was going. I just disappeared. The new city was different, bigger, more anonymous, and that was exactly what I needed. I threw myself into work completely. I worked 10, 12 hours a day, weekends, whatever was necessary not to think. And it worked. Like in 6 months, they gave me a real promotion. I became a project manager. I was making more money than ever. I started going to the gym, going out with coworkers, rebuilding a life that had nothing to do with my past. I didn't date anyone romantically. I wasn't ready for that. But at least I was functioning. I was breathing. A year passed. A whole year without talking to any member of my family. I'd blocked all their numbers, their social media, everything. I was at peace, or at least a version of peace where I didn't think about them every day. And then, one Saturday morning, there was a knock on my door. I opened without looking through the peephole, because I was expecting an Amazon package, and there was Isabella, with a baby in her arms. A girl about 2 years old, maybe almost 3, with curly brown hair and Connor's eyes. There was no doubt who the father was. Isabella looked terrible, honestly, like she hadn't slept in weeks, with deep, dark circles and wrinkled clothes. I froze at the door, not knowing what to do. Isabella started talking fast, saying, "I know I have no right to be here. I know you hate me, but I have no one else. Connor left. He abandoned us. I have no money. I have nowhere to live. Please, Nathan, please help me. It's for Chloe, for your niece." I asked her how she'd found me. She said she'd hired someone to track me down, that it had cost her what little she had, but she needed to find me. The baby, Chloe, started crying, and Isabella was rocking her but looked desperate. I asked her where Connor was. She said he'd left like 4 months ago, that he'd met another woman and just disappeared, that he wasn't paying child support, wasn't answering calls, nothing. I didn't let her in. I stood in the doorway while she begged. Part of me felt pity, especially for the girl who wasn't to blame for anything. But another part, the part that was still angry, the part that remembered finding them in my bed, couldn't. I just couldn't make myself responsible for the consequences of their decisions. Then another car arrived, and out of that car came my mom, Margaret. I hadn't seen my mom in a year, and there she was, walking toward me with that expression I knew so well. That expression of, "I'm going to make you do the right thing, whether you want to or not." Turns out Isabella had called her too, probably thinking that together they'd convince me. Mom arrived and immediately started. How could I be so cruel? That Isabella and Chloe needed help. That I had a good job and a nice house and was clearly fine. That family supports each other in difficult times. That Connor had made a mistake, but that Chloe was innocent. That I was that girl's uncle and had responsibility. I said no. That it wasn't my problem. That Isabella had made her choice when she chose Connor. That Connor had made his choice when he betrayed me, and that the consequences were theirs, not mine. Mom turned red, like literally red with rage, and started yelling in the middle of my building hallway. That I was selfish, that I was petty, that I was abandoning my family when they needed me most, that I should be ashamed. Neighbors started peeking out their doors. It was a scene. Isabella was crying, the baby was crying, Mom was yelling, and I just wanted them to disappear. I went into my apartment, took out my wallet, grabbed all the cash I had, like $500, and gave it to Isabella. I told her that was all she was going to get from me, not to come back, that she didn't have my number, and I wasn't going to help her beyond this. She took the money with trembling hands and started saying, "Thank you." But I was already closing the door. Mom stayed outside, yelling still, saying this wasn't over, that I was going to regret it, that family was forever. I called building security and asked them to remove them. I didn't open the door again that day. But I couldn't leave it like that. The image of that girl, Chloe, stayed engraved in my mind. And the rage that Connor had done this, that he'd destroyed my life and then destroyed Isabella's life and his own daughter's life, was too much. I needed to find him. I needed to confront him. I hired a private investigator. I know, sounds dramatic, but I needed to know where Connor was. It cost me like $1,000, but within a week I had an address. Connor was living in another town, like 3 hours from where I was, in an apartment with a woman. A new girlfriend, apparently. He was working at a sporting goods store, living his life like nothing had happened. I took a day off work, drove there, and waited for him outside his work. When he came out, I almost didn't recognize him. He'd grown out his beard, was thinner, but it was him. He saw me, and the color completely drained from his face. He started walking fast toward his car, but I caught up to him. I didn't hit him, though I wanted to. Instead, I told him everything I'd wanted to say for a year, that he was a piece of shit, that he'd destroyed families, mine, Isabella's, his own daughter's, that he had a 2-year-old daughter who didn't know her father because he decided to run away instead of facing his responsibilities, that Isabella had shown up at my door desperate, and that I, the brother he'd betrayed, had to give her money because he wasn't doing anything. Connor started crying, literally crying there in the parking lot. He said he was sorry, that he'd ruined everything, that he didn't know how to fix it, that he was afraid to face the consequences. I told him I didn't care about his apologies, that he needed to take care of his daughter, that he needed to pay child support, that he needed to be a father even if he was a terrible father. He nodded and said he would, that he was going to start sending money. I don't know if he did. Honestly, I don't care. I gave Isabella my number through a message left with my mom, telling her that if she needed Connor's contact information for child support, to write me, but that was it, not to expect anything else from me. She never contacted me directly. I cut off contact completely with Mom and Dad after that. I sent Dad an email explaining that I wasn't going to have a relationship with them as long as they kept defending Connor, as long as they kept trying to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. He responded, saying he respected my decision but hoped that someday I could forgive. I never responded. It's been like 6 months since all that. I'm fine, honestly. They promoted me again at work. Now I'm director of operations for my division. I started dating someone a couple months ago. Nothing serious yet, but it's good to feel like I can trust someone again. I've been going to therapy too, which helps. More than I thought it would. Do I regret anything? Not really. Maybe I should have handled some things differently. Maybe I shouldn't have broken Connor's nose, though honestly, that part still gives me a certain satisfaction. But setting boundaries, leaving, remaking my life away from all that toxicity, I don't question that for a second. People say family is everything, that family is forever. But I learned that family is only worth something if there's respect and loyalty, and in my case there was neither. Sometimes I wonder about Chloe. If she's okay, if Connor ever took responsibility. I hope so. She doesn't deserve to pay for her parents' terrible decisions. But it's not my responsibility to save her. And I had to accept that, as difficult as it was. At the end of the day, I'm at peace. I built a new life from scratch. A life where the people around me respect and value me. And that's enough for now, I guess. It's more than I had a year and a half ago, when my world fell apart. And if I learned anything from all this, it's that sometimes the best decision is to walk away, rebuild, and not look back.